after really 20, 30 years of waiting for this kind of generational investment, it's finally here. And we have to be prepared to deploy it in a way that will build the infrastructure we need 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now. The federal government is committed somewhere in the ballpark. You can do this math in a lot of different ways. $1.6 trillion into various forms of infrastructure through the bipartisan infrastructure law, the CHIPS Act, the Inflation Reduction Act. But the demand for this kind of integrative, science-driven work is just essential. And we hear this every day when we talk to mayors, when we talk to our partners in the federal government, governors and their staff, the need to try to figure out how to use this money in the most effective way that tackles big equity, resilience, environmental, economic issues is just, it's off the charts. So what does that mean in practice? So the first one is to work with the federal government to tackle these big emerging, challenging policy issues that don't really fit neatly into the siloed world that we've really built up around infrastructure. So how can we accelerate these big transformative moments and technologies that we have into the infrastructure and built environment? A lot of it actually is around asset management, right? How can we drive down lifecycle costs? How can we figure out how to build projects the correct way up front, whether that's through software or design or new materials? So there's that big federal piece, but we're also trying to bring this down to the state and local level. So we're continuing the work that our very own Gulf Research Program, helping to focus communities to help them identify and prioritize how they can make best use of state and federal funding to achieve their big strategic priorities. We brought together 50 leading stakeholders from the Gulf, from the private sector, from the government, Army Corps, state and locals. And what we did is we worked with CNA, which is Center for Naval Analysis, to use the exact same tools that the Department of Defense uses for wargaming. And so literally we created a tabletop exercise where a bunch of very senior people sat around and walked through a strategy session where they actually said this oil bunker busted and oil went here, and what's your reaction? Who do you call in? How does FEMA interact? So really this incredibly dynamic game. And we modeled both an oil spill and a hurricane scenario. And as much as we say game, these are very formal, developed. You see these huge decision trees of hundreds of different outcomes walking through, really kind of digging into how infrastructure asset operators, owners, regulators, stakeholders, and other users really understand their system in this kind of dynamic way, and really kind of forcing the decisions and helping them to rethink priorities, I think was a really fun activity and really substantively helpful. And I know a lot of stakeholders we continue to work with in the region, it's actually changed the way they look at their assets and the ways that they'd like to approach these things. So beyond that, we're also talking about taking this kind of gaming framework or another type of maybe less rigorous, I'd say, or less structured approach to doing similar things in two regions. So one, we're in discussion with EPA to do one in New England, probably focused on storm surges. So looking at probably the National Estuary programs and how those assets keep New York City and other major metropolitan areas safe, and thinking through those types of scenarios and how to prioritize and integrate federal investments, whether that's from FEMA and BRICS, or whether that's new US DOT investments, or whether it's EPA coming through SRFs into these communities, how we can coordinate those to make sure that we get more bang for our buck. So it's not a bunch of one-off projects all across the region, but this is an integrative strategy that goes across county borders, that goes across state borders to make sure we achieve these big picture outcomes we all know that we want. And additionally, we actually just got funded for this to do similar work around Lake Erie to make sure that the outcomes for the entire region meet the needs of not only the environment there, but also the greater economy, whether that's agriculture, industry, or just people having clean water to drink every day.